But speaking of get going, I better get going with you because, you're pretty valuable time.
Yeah, maybe.
So tell me about your mom and dad, Paul.
Well, my dad and mom got together and way back just at the start of the Depression. My dad was working in a store. My mom had quit. She had quit in 9th grade. Very good student, newspaper editor of the paper, but she quit to help the family because they were short of money. Anyway, they got married, and my dad decided he was going to go into the ministry. And when I was about 3 years old, he was assigned to his first church down in western Pennsylvania. And then when I was 5, we moved from a place that was, electricity, running water, city. He was assigned to 3 churches down in West Virginia. We got there in the middle of the night in an old truck that smelled like cows. I was 5 years old, and no electricity, no running water. I started school there through 7th grade in a one-room schoolhouse, and I think I remember looking at my dad's records. First year that we were there, the 3 churches combined paid him a total $870 for it.
Oh my golly.
So we were not rich. It was a great time. It really was.
What a religion was he? What affiliation?
He was Free Methodist pastor.
Methodist, okay.
Yeah. And then, of course, that was during the Depression, and I guess somebody asked, how'd you get involved in sports? Well, I probably never saw baseball or basketball until I was, 9 or 10 or so. Because we just didn't have the money. There was no Little League. There was nothing of that sort. So I had an uncle who lived in Uniontown, Pennsylvania. He came up and picked me up, took me to Pittsburgh to see my first baseball game of any kind, high school or anything. And I don't know if he knew when we went, but that was the first time Jackie Robinson came to play in Pittsburgh with the Dodgers. And that place was jumping. It really was. And I guess that put the bug to do something in sports, and I never got away from it.
So, Paul, you were born what year?
1935.
So 1935, so your uncle takes you to Forbes Field to see a baseball game.
When I was 12 years old.
12 years old, so that would have been, so Robinson, 1947.
47.
And, of course, they were, at that time, in black baseball out of Pittsburgh with the Homestead Grays and the Pittsburgh Crawfords. Big deal.
It was a big deal. The place where we lived down in West Virginia, I don't mean this to sound racist at all, but there just weren't many black people lived in that area down there. And boy, they were there that night when Jackie showed up.
I'm sure.
And I remember he stole second base, and I thought they were going to tear the place down. It was amazing, yeah.
You're 12 years old. Did you recognize any sort of animosities between the crowds, the whites and the blacks? Was that?
No, I wasn't aware of animosity at that point, I guess, and I don't think there was. I didn't hear anything.
No, the white owners, the Pirates, welcomed all the black people who showed up.
Yeah, oh yeah.
That's money.
Yeah. Rosie Rosewell and Bob Prince were doing the announcing, and I don't know if anybody ever heard Rosie Rosewell. Open the window out, Minnie, how it comes. Here it comes, and then he'd bang the pans together for every home run. Yeah, I used to. After we finally got electricity down in West Virginia, I used to listen to Pirate games and do my homework down there in the hills. Listen to every Pirate game.
Who was your hero in the late 40s?
Ralph Kiner.
Oh, yeah, gotta be.
Yeah, Ralph Kiner. Yeah, and of course, there just were a lot of, particularly,
That's me, that's me. Here we go. I got it ready. So Ralph Kiner and,
well, I'm trying to think of his name. A left-handed, they used him as a pinch hitter all the time. I think he'd get out of bed in the morning and pinch hit. And chunky little guy, I can't even remember his name. And that's
Smokey Burgess.
Smokey Burgess. You have it, Smokey Burgess. He didn't play a lot, but boy, when he came off the bench, look out.
He looked like he was 5 by 5. I mean,
Yeah.
he just didn't look anything but a baseball player.
Right, exactly. So, yeah.
So you're a Pirates guy growing up.
Grew up with the Pirates and have been ever since. Yeah.
So where were you when Bill Mazeroski hit the home run?
I was on my way home from high school in Indiana, Pennsylvania. We had moved to Indiana, Pennsylvania. And that was quite a story because we moved from a one-room schoolhouse to a high school of 2,000. And that was a social change if you ever saw one.
Wow.
It really was. And yeah, I was on my way home and somebody had a portable radio, a battery-operated radio, and Billy Mazeroski hit that home run. Yeah, never forget that.
Us Pirate fans, me too. Know where you were. So Indiana, Pennsylvania. So your dad had a church there in Indiana?
Yes.
Did they treat you as the pastor's kid, or did you ever feel that, sort of, I don't want to say stigma, but, people had that attitude?
Well, you had to behave.
Yeah.
People, I'll never forget when I was very, very small in church. I must have been 2 or 3 years old, and I'll never forget it. My dad was preaching a sermon, and I thought I could get away with stuff, and I was misbehaving, and my mother couldn't do anything with me. My dad came down out of the pulpit, walked back, paddled my rear end, and never missed a bit of his sermon in the process.
In front of everybody?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I had to behave, but I never got into any serious trouble. I didn't dare.
So you had siblings?
I had a brother who was 5 years younger and a sister who was 2.5 years younger. So there were 3 of us. Then I now have a sister. My mother died of cancer at age 54, but at age 40 she unexpectedly got pregnant, and I was married and my wife was pregnant with our first child, and my mother and my wife had babies 3 weeks apart.
Oh my golly.
Yeah.
Did your mother figure it out, or was it sort of a divine intervention here?
Well, I guess it must have been. It was very unexpected, I know. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. So Indiana, Pennsylvania, and then you there during that time. Did you participate in sports there in Indiana?
Well, we first moved from West Virginia to Tarentum, Pennsylvania, which is on the Allegheny River there, north of Pittsburgh. We were only there 2 years. And going from a one-room schoolhouse with 20-some kids to high school of 2,000, it was almost, it scared you to death. And of course, Tarentum was one of the, all of that area around Pittsburgh, big in football, and everybody was. So I didn't play football. I tried out for the baseball team, and I think I might have in 9th grade. And we were having a practice one day, and practice scrimmage, and one of the seniors decided to show me who was boss, and came into second base and took me out and broke my collarbone, and of course I missed all that season, and then we moved the second year I was there and went to Indiana, and we were there until I graduated from high school, and then went away to college.
So you went to Robert Wesleyan.
Right, in Rochester.
Rochester. Now that was, of course, it's very it's a church school or a religious school. Is that related to the mission, free mission?
Free Methodist, yeah,
Free Methodist,
sorry.
I'm sorry, Free Methodist, yeah.
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 Yeah, it's a Free Methodist sponsored college. Yeah, I went there. The same uncle took me to Pittsburgh to see the game. Gave me a job for 2 summers painting with him. He was a school teacher and he painted in the summer. So I went and lived with him and his wife, my Aunt Irene, my mother's sister. And we painted for those 2 summers, and I was able to save $100. The day after high school graduation, I left home with $100 in my wallet, and little knowing that I was going to be the first person in my entire family to graduate from college 5 years later. I was able to stretch 4 years at college into 5 years in order to get through, because I had to work my way through. In the meantime, way back in West Virginia, my dad's superintendent would come to visit, and he brought his family. And there was a little gal. I was 10 years old, and believe it or not, at 10 years old, I wrote on the blackboard, "I love you." And I was too bashful. Nobody who knows me could believe I was ever bashful, but I had my sister show it to her, and that was the start of a romance that ended this last August after 78 years. 68 years that I was married. So that was, we moved to Tarentum, away from where she lives in Fairmont, West Virginia, then to Indiana, and she moved to California. And finally, my senior year, I decided this is the gal that I'm still in love with, and wrote to her, and she came back and went to college with me, and that romance went on for another 68 years.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. You graduated with a BA at Robert Wesleyan in English.
Yes.
And did you know what you might want to do?
Yeah, when I think maybe it was because of my father being a minister. That was kind of my original intent. And I took several courses, Bible history and some of that stuff. And graduated with a BA. In fact, when I graduated, I was assigned to a church in Forestville, New York, and pastored there for 2 years. But during that time, I drove bus, got paid $28 a week, and then drove bus at the school. And the bus supervisor said, Wanda needs a teacher. I think you'd be a good teacher. And he said, go over and interview. This is only 2 weeks before school started. So I felt it my obligation to at least tell the superintendent of Gowanda that I was going to go for an interview. He offered me a raise and a better schedule, and so I wrote him a letter back to the superintendent of Castanega Valley and told him I decided to stay at Gowanda. I said that letter, I forgot to mail it. I came home from school that night. Here was the pastor of the Free Methodist Church in Gary and one of the laymen, Stan Hall, sitting on my porch waiting for me, and they talked me to at least going to Castanega Valley for an interview. Had I mailed that letter, everything would have been different.
Wow.
And of course, I had that year of teaching at Gowanda, and it was a tough getting used to because I didn't have any teaching credentials. So and they gave me an assignment over there where I was teaching 5 grade levels from 7 through 12, 5 different preps a day, and that was so I went to Castanega for an interview and fell in love with the place. Up there on the hill where I could watch the deer and the football practices and everything out my window, and he offered me the same raise I was going to get at Gowanda. and 1 prep. So I teach 5 classes in 9th grade English, and I thought I died and going to heaven. So I decided, yeah, we're going to go. And but that year of teaching would go on to convince me that the ministry was not I want to call it my calling, that I felt I could do more good as a coach and a teacher than I ever could do at a church someplace where sometimes things don't go too well for you. And
well, one thing consistent, Paul, is when you fall in love for a long time. So you fell in love with Cassadaga, and 33 years later.
33 years later, yeah. Yeah, that was, I really enjoyed it there. Well, I still had this great interest in sports, so while I was at Forestville, you remember the name Al Muck.
Sure.
Probably a great pitcher. And of course, he lived not far from me, and he was 16 years old and throwing a great curveball. And most of the young kids didn't want, so I would go up to the high school and serve as catcher for Al Muck, and still had that interest in sports. Well, I went to Cassadaga. I'd been there 1 year, and Art Asquith, a legend to everybody who knows him, offered me the job as his assistant baseball coach, JV coach, and I jumped at the chance with no coaching experience, and he had enough faith in me to let me go and take it over. And what a guy he was, what a help he was, because he would come to practice, tell me out, and I never felt intimidated by him. You know, usually a coach, a guy who's played in the minor leagues, signed by a major league team, and a very successful coach, you'd feel uncomfortable about, but never that way, and that friendship goes to today. He's 95, and we still talk on a regular basis and do things together, and so that was the start. Then when he gave up the varsity baseball job, he recommended me, and so I had 2 years with the varsity baseball, and had good time there. We had won 2. He left me a good team, and we won 2 county championships in a row. I think in 75, 76, and then my family was young, and the spring weather around here was getting to me. The snow. I can remember one night we were having to play at Stockton on the fireman's grounds up there, and it was, the field at Cassadaga was too bad to play on. And it was so cold, it was spitting snow. And of course the winter was not quite over. The kids on both benches went out in the woods during the game, the bench warmers, and picked up sticks and came back. And both benches had a fire going in front of the benches to stay warm. And I remember another night playing that same field with Dale Till was coaching the JVs at Brockton, and we were playing on Saturday morning over there, and it snowed so hard that it started covering the field, and we were dumb enough, rather than calling the game, we got a broom and swept off the foul lines and finished the game. And then I ended up teaching with Dale at Cassadaga Valley, and we often wondered why we could be so stupid as to do something like that. But when you're young, you tend to be a lot more stupid. Yeah.
So your school career, let me just highlight some stuff here that I've been reading. You were the school's newspaper advisor for 31 years.
Correct.
Your journalism students won more than 50 awards, selected as one of the 25 journalism teachers. You were nationwide for a fellowship grant at Syracuse, chosen as advisor of the year in the St. Bonaventure Press Competition. You began a literary magazine in 1975. It was published for 12 years. Both the magazine and newspaper received first place awards in the Empire State Press Competition in 77 and 78. No wonder your keen interest in writing, which we see especially now during the Gary Rodeo.
I loved that journalism class because kids came to that because they wanted to be there. And I also, in the middle of that, started a photography club, and we had a small dark room up on the second floor. It was an old closet. And a lot of the kids went into, in fact, one of my journalism students ended up as a professor at Bob Kokersberger at North Carolina State. Yeah. His dad, probably you'd know from Jamestown Community College.
Right.
I had one of my photography students end up as the photographer for the Navy's Blue Angels.
Wow.
And just a lot of wonderful things happened. And I look back on it, I wonder, I think probably, I don't know, I tried to do things with my family. Maybe I tried to do too much, but elsewhere for other people's kids, but my kids seem to have enjoyed it, and they look back on all the things we did, and so yeah, I had a great time with all of that.
Well, aside from journalism and aside from the photography, you also coached several sports over 24 years and suffered only one losing season.
Yeah, that was the first year. I gave up baseball mostly because of the weather and my small family. Then the girls' softball job opened up, and I don't think I could have coached girls earlier in my career, but it was a big change. But that was the first year we went 6-6, and I had to change the whole atmosphere because the girls were used to coming to softball practice with their shorts and sun lotion and sitting on the bench till their term came to take batting practice, and they didn't realize they were supposed to be out there shagging balls, and they were supposed to run a bit and that sort of thing. And so but that was 8 or 9 years, I think, before I retired. And we never had a losing season after that. And of course, the highlight was 1991 when we made it to the state Final Four. Interestingly, I got back and checked. This is the only team in any sport in Castaga Valley history that ever got as far as the state playoffs.
Really?
Yeah, they never made it in any other sport. So, what a time that was. And those girls, they still come to see me, bring their kids. And it's tough to realize that they're 40 years old now, and getting to be old people. But
well, you were named Coach of the Year that year by the Post-Journal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't have much choice after.
Then it says something here about you played softball in the Jamestown Church League. I remember those days.
Yeah, I started out playing with the Jamestown Free Methodist Church, and then I got an invitation to play with the CMA and to play alongside you, Greg, and all three of the Thorpe boys. And one of my idols in all the sports was Kenny Martin. So I played second base, and Kenny was shortstop, and anybody knows Kenny knows what a great ball player he was, played in professional baseball. Anything was hit to that side of the infield with runners on, you better head for second base because Kenny was going to field it and get the ball there. He just was an amazing person and a great guy. And fortunately, I got to spend some time with him in the nursing home not long before he died, but he was a great guy. What time, I think we played in there for 9 or 10 years. They were allowed to recruit 3 people, I think, who didn't go to their church. And one of those people was Greg Peterson, and I was one. I forget who the third one was, but Greg cheated a little bit. He joined their church a little bit later, so he didn't have to be recruited.
I was encouraged to cheat by Dewey Westerberg, our manager, as you recall. And the reason was, let me tell you the reason was, we had a pitcher, he brought in Barry Neubauer.
Oh, yeah.
Remember Dubar?
Oh, yeah.
Barry or Gary, I forget one of the two. And he clearly was never going to go to church. So, but he was going to be a good pitch. And Dewey said, Greg, you're now going to become an official member of CMA. So I called my friends at Hillcrest and said, sorry, I got to play a bit of softball. So, yeah, I became not one of those three. It was you and Kenny. Kenny was the other one, and Barry, and that was quite the team. And then of course Dewey used me as a catcher. His knees were shot, and so I became the catcher for a long time. And yeah, we won some championships.
I think we won 7, 8, 9 years in a row. We had a good team. We went through. So I remember 3 or 4 different pitchers, but. But I played. Then I played with the county firemen's league into my 60s, and
oh my gosh!
one of the things, I never hit a long ball, but I could hit a ball where I wanted to put it, and that was a big asset. In fact, I was 56, I think, with George Sisson. I was playing with a team with George Sisson. If you know George, he's always on somebody's back about something. And he got at me one day and he said, "You're losing it, Cooley. Your speed's gone. One thing I could do was run." And George was on my back. So we were playing down at the softball field down by the stadium down there, Dietrich Stadium. And I said, "George, I can still beat out a bunt." He said, "I don't believe you can." So I thought, well, I'm going to. Before the day was over, I bunted 5 times and beat all 5 of them out. And believe it or not, George shut his mouth.
I can't believe that. But
that doesn't sound possible.
I'm delighted you did.
Shut him up, or
Yeah, for at least a minute. And you were a high school and then college basketball official for 34 years, both boys and girls section. So
52 years, I should.
Oh, well, this is obviously an old one here.
Yeah.
52. Let's put that right here. How did you go? Was this something to do in the winter?
Yeah, I don't know why I did it. Just all at once in 1962, I said, well, I can't remember who it was. I said, why don't you come take the basketball class? Because I knew I liked sports. And I can't remember. So I decided, well, I'll go down. And of course, you have to take the 8 weeks of class from Roger McTavish. And that was an experience because Roger expected you to memorize the rule book. What a guy he was. He was a great guy. And there are only 2, and then you have to take this national exam, an international exam. And there are only 2 of us who passed that exam that year. It was a 50-question exam, and you could miss 7. And my test came out exactly 7 missed, so I qualified. And you start out in this crazy industrial league that they had in town. And then they had a county league, the Witch Kitchen, all of those teams. And that was rough basketball.
Yeah.
No protection, no security there, and you get 7. I think you were getting $7 a game, 2 games for $10, and it was quite a thing. But I stuck with it, and things went well for me. And it wasn't long before I was working full schedule at varsity, and then later on got into college a little bit. Worked some games at Fredonia State, freshman games at Niagara and St. Bonaventure, and but they were paying no expenses. I drove one day to Niagara University when Calvin Murphy was playing. He was on the varsity, and I was doing the freshman game. I got to see Calvin Murphy come in in a 3/4 length fur coat and a hat. Somebody threw him a basketball as he walked through the gym at 5'2" or 3. Went over with his fur coat and dunked a basketball with 2 hands. well, crazy. But anyway, I was gone 11 hours in a snowstorm, got paid $25, no travel. Then they got assigned to 2 games in Rochester the same week, and I was still teaching, and that's a long trip. And I decided I need to spend more time at home with the family, so I gave up the college ball. So I didn't get very far in that. That was too much traveling, too much headaches, and but I had a great time with basketball, working with some of the great names of Chautauqua County here, Jack Fulford and Russ Eklund, and a lot of the good ones.
And Paul Cooley. Paul Cooley almost missed your very first ever high school assignment, a junior varsity game at Clymer. Quote, "It was a foggy night and I'd never been to Clymer. There was rain and fog and we drove straight past Clymer Central and never saw it. And the next thing you know, I see down the road a sign that says, Corey, 6 miles."
Oh dear, I know who I was working with too, was Christy Palermo. Had the restaurant out in Kimball Stand there. Christy Palermo. Yeah, I mean, it was foggy, it was raining, and that high school sits on your right in Clymer. You can drive right through it and not. And where in the world is Corey, Pennsylvania? That was my first high school assignment. But we made it on time, yeah.
And then you were asked one time whether you had ever thought about calling it quits during your 52 years. And you said only 1 year, one situation where you were threatened physically. Coach told me I better not step outside the gym and that sort of thing. It was a wild confrontation, and my wife was there, and it just wasn't pretty.
It was not pretty, no, and I guess I won't tell you where it was. I remember it as vividly as she had to hear the whole thing, and he just was. Anyway, but there were a lot of good nights. I'll never forget going to not Chickamauga, just outside Buffalo up there. Anyway, and a team at Niagara, what was a vocational school for Niagara Falls, and a team from over in Cattaraugus County to work a sectional playoff game. And it really was black against white. There wasn't a white kid on the one team, and so there was some animosity there. And the coach at halftime, I was working with Lyle Parker. And of course, Lyle is not one to hide his light under a bushel. And the coach threw his clipboard at both of us as we left at halftime, and that didn't help things any. That just inflamed things a bit. And after the game was over, we headed for the locker room, and I think that was the freest I've ever been. Big, thick doors that were just rocking as the one team tried to get in. And I don't know what they would have done had they gotten in, but no security anywhere, no cops, and that was a scary night. But kind of the neatest night, I told this in my induction speech into Hall of Fame. I went to Clymer a number of times, and this dear old lady sat up there, and she'd kind of wave at me every time, and we just got to be friends, without being friends. And she called me one night with her finger, and she said, "Come here a minute," before the game, and I went over, and she took my hand and patted me so sweet and nice, and she says, "Mr. Cooley, I think you're a great official, but I'm going to pray real hard tonight that you do a better job than when you were here last week." Yeah, and you just wanted to hug her, it was so sweet. But, stick a knife in you and hug you at the same time. Yeah. Oh, there's so many experiences that are good experiences, so many friends that you make over the years, and they far outweigh the bad.
Well, yeah, you also, at the time you retired, you were the second oldest and second longest active official next to Roger McTavish.
Right.
And you were quoted as saying, 2 years ago, we were probably the oldest pair to work a playoff game. I had 41 years at that time, and I think he had 48. We worked the Fredonia Southwestern girls game at Lockport, and Dick Prince walked up before the game and he said, "Do we call the emergency crew now or later?"
That's Dick Prince, you know. Yeah, he was funny. I can't imagine that we had to drive clear to Lockport to play a Southwestern Fredonia girls playoff game. And that's a long, but the game went very well, but that was a playoff game that I think was probably the furthest that. Well, I did work one game at the other side of Rochester, a sectional or a regional basketball game, but that was a long trip to do a girls basketball game on a bad day. But Roger and I, Dick Prince, that was his one an hour or later.
That's cute. You know, I was just reading, I think just the other day, if not today, about an article of the upcoming Gary Rodeo authored by a guy named Paul Cooley. Familiar with him?
I've heard of him. I've heard other people talk about him, sometimes not always well.
But you have been affiliated with him really since around 1960, right?
62, I joined the fire department.
My golly.
So that's 62 years.
And I know you've written, because I'm looking at an article here, Paul, 2014, The History of the Gary Rodeo. And we recently, I found and gave to Randy the original program of 1945. I couldn't believe
I have that on my computer now.
Yeah, perfect. So, it was just one of those crazy things. So how did you get involved, and talk a little bit about the Gary Rodeo?
Well, you volunteer and get out and you do things like painting or cleaning up and, things like that. And of course, the firemen all are supposed to, they're expected to help out, and that maybe 20% of them do. But anyway, I got to working around down there, and they had one of the hot dog stands over on the side of the arena, and they said, "We need somebody to run that hot dog stand." And that must have been probably maybe 1970, and I've been that hot dog stand ever since. I have a great crew. I mentioned George Sisson and his family come out. My son-in-law and daughter and granddaughter come from North Carolina. So we run that hot dog stand over there. And then the Post-Journal used to always send somebody out, and of course they're sure to help. It was before Jim Riggs.
Frank Hyde.
Frank Hyde. Frank moved here from, I think, Colorado or Montana, out west. He just loved rodeo, so Frank could be there every night. And then when he passed away, Dent Thorpe loved rodeo, and you couldn't keep him away. Dent would be out there daytime and nighttime, and even when after, if I remember right, Dent had pretty poor health. In fact, I think he maybe ended up, I think he ended up with an amputation. But anyway, he would be out there. Well, then Jim Riggs called me up one day and he said, "We don't have, Den had died." He said, "We don't have anybody that knows anything about rodeo, and I really don't have anybody to send out. And I know you write, had the journalism class. Would you be willing to do some?" In the meantime, they had somebody that they had asked to do it, or she volunteered to do it, and it just wasn't turning out well. They wanted somebody who would do a little bit more of the personal stuff rather than just putting the results in a column, and that sort of thing. So I said, well, I'll try it, and I don't know, it's been probably 25 years now, 20 years at least, that I've been doing they gave me a fancy title. It's called Media Coordinator, which means that I enjoy the writing and the the association with the cowboys and cowgirls. They're wonderful people. You like to think of them as a wild bunch, but they aren't. They're wonderful, kind, patriotic people, most of them of great faith. And we just, in fact, for several years when we still had my rodeo on Sunday afternoon, we had a rodeo service that I headed up, and we'd get 300 to 400 people in the bleachers out there on the Sunday morning. Had some great Sunday morning speakers and musicians and so forth. So, but of course, once we did away with Sunday performances, the rodeo is gone by midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. They're up and gone Sunday morning. The grounds are bare. So but it was. I enjoy that. The only problem is your deadline for the newspaper's midnight.
Yeah.
The rodeo gets over at 10:30, 20 to 11, and you run home and try to get a story. And you get to my age, your brain slows down, your fingers slow down. You don't do as. But Scott Kittenberg's been wonderful to work with, and he's even held the presses up a couple times when I've been 5-10 minutes late, and tells me not to worry about it. He's just been super to work with, and so it's something I have really enjoyed, and it's been I think a contribution not only to the fire department but to the entire community for being associated with rodeo and seeing it's a worthwhile sport, and promoting it here in the East when it's supposed to be a big West thing. Has been a contribution I think feel I've made to rodeo, so I feel good about it.
Well, you are quoted as saying it's a family atmosphere, it's the ideal small town America. Everybody pitches in, works together to give it a wonderful reputation. It is thought of very highly across the United States by the cowboys and cowgirls they come. They love the atmosphere, so much so that it's become the longest running rodeo east of the Mississippi.
79 years.
Unbelievable.
This year is 79, and we've got to the point where we're getting recognized across the country. In fact, last year, although once one of the great rodeo cowboys in history, Joe Beaver, you see him all the time on the Cowboy Channel. He's one of the announcers now. But he won 8 national finals, world championships in roping. He just showed up to Gary Rodeo, said he had heard about it. He wanted to come and see it, and maybe add a little to the rodeo, and he and a partner of his competed in the team roping. They got second place, but he's well into he's approaching 60 years old and still acting. So that was, and of course we're, in the last 3 years we've been able to get a large stadium type screen out there, 20 by 8 feet, which shows close-ups and replays and adds a lot to it. And then we're also live streaming on the Cowboy Channel app.
Really?
So for the last 3 years, people have been able to get on the Cowboy Channel app and watch it. And then the Cowboy Channel has been putting 100 rodeos a year on, and the Gary Rodeo was on live, not live, but actually on the Cowboy Channel a couple of weeks after our rodeo was over for 4 days. And so,
great exposure.
yeah, and it's a great thing for the whole area because they spend a lot of money, 250 cowboys, cowgirls, feed for their horses, food, repair for their equipment, food while they're here, and they're here for some of them a whole week. They travel all over, and some of them come back on vacation later in Chautauqua County. So it's a boost to the county. And
you're in the middle of it, and you're the promotion guy, the Post-Journal PR reporter extraordinaire. Tell me, what's your favorite? I mean, there's several events during the course of a rodeo. What's the one you like to watch the most?
I like the bull riding.
Bull riding?
Yeah. we've had an extra thing with the girls all love. That's that breakaway roping that we've added 3 years ago. So the women now have two, the barrel racing and the breakaway roping. That's kind of a neat event. They rope the calf at full speed, and that rope is tied with a string to the saddle horn, and when the calf hits it, it breaks. And when that breaks loose from the saddle, then the clock stops. So it's there's no roping tying the calf involved, but it is a great thing. It's an exciting event and gives the women a little more with the rodeo.
Do you know the secret recipe for the barbecue sauce?
No, sir, I don't.
You're not going to get it from you.
It's passed along.
Okay. I mean, that's the key to that whole dinner that I always go to. You know, bring the kids. It's that.
That's amazing. We serve about 3,000 dinners that week, and almost 4,000 pounds of beef that week cooked outdoors over a wood fire, and it's just an amazing process, yeah.
Well, it is good, and I know that because you said so, that it's the potatoes that are your favorite thing.
Oh, I guess I can mention his name, Dr. Holly, medical doctor.
Paul Holly.
Paul Holly.
Yeah.
He comes down and works the hamburger stand for me in the hot dog stand every year. He fries hamburgers all with that grease and it's getting burned with grease and the whole thing. And he never goes over and has any of the meals. In fact, I saw him a couple of weeks ago with an appointment. He says, "You're going to have my potatoes this year if I show up." And I said, "Yeah." I have to go and get him a big plate of potatoes with gravy and that sauce, and that's all he eats for the whole week. And probably the only hot dog stand in the country where we have two medical doctors cooking hot dogs and serving.
Who's that?
The other one, he's a medical student right now, and he graduates this year as Jeepers. His name. I just emailed him this week and told him we miss him in rodeo, and isn't that terrible? I can't think of his name. So
Go ahead.
if anything goes wrong, we have medical help right there.
Boy, I can say that. I love it. Well, you have done so much, Paul, in so many areas. I mean, look at this wad of paper I have here to do the interview. It's unbelievable.
Well, I guess I didn't mention it. My first, they did away with JV baseball for a while because there weren't enough teams playing in the county. So they put me as an assistant to Jack Haskins, and we won 2 county championships in a row. In fact, our pole vaulter won a state championship, Craig Sigerland, and we didn't have a track, and we won 2 championships. And I got involved. We built the first. We got a couple of parents involved. We hauled cinders from the light plant up in Dunkirk.
Yeah.
Built the first track at the Sinclairville Elementary School, and they've had a track team ever since. Well, then when baseball came back, I gave up the track because my love was baseball. And but I did work with the track team for a couple of years, and Jack Haskins.
It's the mere fact that you mentioned cinders, because that's people used to have cinder tracks.
And you fell on that, they were rubbed. Yeah, when I was in Indiana high school, I ran track some, and I'll never forget in a relay race on a rainy day, falling when I passed the baton, falling off and came up with cinders. You pick those cinders out of your legs for days.
It's like shrapnel.
Oh, you're not allowed to use them anymore.
Yeah, I know, a good thing. One of the things we got to mention is the fact that you were 52 years of officiating, and your biggest fan who followed you the most and saw the most of your games was?
My wife. She was an amazing person. I probably get emotional with this because it's only been a year this August since she passed after 68 years, but she was a very quiet woman, and most of the officials' wives wouldn't go to the games because of what went on with yelling at the officials. But she would even take the little girls, our 3 little girls, and go. And she became kind of adopted by the officials. In fact, when I retired from officiating, my last game was the All-Star game at Castaga Valley, County All-Star game. They presented her with flowers and a plaque, and she was also presented earlier at the banquet with a basketball with her name on, signed by the, 50, 60 officials for having attended over 1,000 ball games over those 52 years.
Wow.
And quite some stories. I was working a game with Bill Thomas at Dunkirk, and the coach was really on our back. And so I'm still fuming a little bit when I head for the car. Bill and I head for the car, and I said, I don't know what he was yelling about. I think I had that right. I don't know what he was yelling about. She very quietly pats me on the back. She says, honey, calm down. I think he was right. So, yeah, she just was amazing. She put everybody before herself. She just raised our 3 girls with me being as busy as it was. You can imagine how many late suppers she had and how many dirty clothes uniforms she had to do, and just amazing. And so it was, and the thing I'm most grateful for was that she was alert and conscious right up to the end. And the night, less than 24 hours before she passed, she was in intensive care, and there were some of the neighbors and our daughters there. And the nurse came in and she said, you really have a good husband there. You must have trained him well. And she looked up and laughed, and she said, well, I tried. That was her last, yeah. So, yeah, anything I ever did, she was responsible for, because she could have put a stop to most anything, by not supporting, but she supported everything. And she just was an amazing person. She really was.
As are you, an amazing person, Paul Cooley.
Well, I appreciate that, but I think the big thing is that I like to say I've got more out of this than I ever gave. The friends I've made, you look back over those years, and the things notes that I get. In fact, not long ago, I have to tell one more story. When I was coaching softball, the year we went to the States, the last game we were undefeated, 17-0, and Faulkner beat us, and my shortstop made an error which probably cost us the ball game. And somebody said something to her, yelled something at her, and she came with her uniform after the game just in hysterics. She said, I'm quitting. I cost us the game, a perfect season. I'm not going to play anymore. And I couldn't talk her out of it. So I went in town, and I bought a white rose. I went home and I wrote a note, and I put the rose and the note in her locker the next morning before she got there. Shortly, she came down to my room, and she said, can I have my uniform back? I said, yeah. And she played well for us. In fact, she was a key cog in our going to the States. Well, now 40 years later, just last year, my wife was still living then, so it was a blessing for her as well. Knock came at the front door, and it's this gal. 40 years later, guess what she has to hand to me? A white rose. 40 years later. And that blew me away.
What a great image. What a great image. Well, Paul, I can't thank you enough. This has been a fabulous interview. Thank you for spending some time.
Well, thank you for that. I just, I appreciate telling the story and saying thanks to all the people. I just wish I could list all the people who have been such a good part of my life, but there's so many people. I just, So if I die tomorrow, I have no regrets because I've been so good, treated so well. I have people now, my wife passed. This voice is gone. Too much talking here. Been so good to me. This last week I had 3 different days that people brought meals in. And just kind things that are done. And I look at that Hall of Fame thing, that blew me away, because when you look at this Hall of Fame, what a wonderful thing it is, and the people that are there who have accomplished great things in athletics. I wonder how they ever got there, but it was a great honor, and I just am grateful for everything.
We're grateful for you, Paul, so thank you ever so much.
Well, thank you for taking your time.